First, I was thinking about this. The events I'm going to tell you about happened in 1987. And when I first kind of started talking about them publicly, it was about 4 years later in 1991. And when I was driving out here, you have things to think about driving out 183 from downtown. I was thinking that was 18 years ago, you know, and it's phenomenal when I look back now and see what all has happened to me as a result of this. So my background briefly is I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, up in the Panhandle. And I guess I was what I'd call barely Methodist. We went to church a couple of 3 times a year. It wasn't that my family didn't have faith, but we weren't very active practitioners of the Christian faith. And then I came to UT and got an undergrad degree in business, and then I stayed and I got a law degree. So I was here 7 years. That's why I'm wearing orange tonight. I then went to Houston and worked for a United States judge down there, which was a really good job, and then went to work for a law firm. And by the mid-1980s, I thought I had it, all right? I was doing really well financially, but I was probably working about 60 to 70 hours a week and doing a lot of travel. And my wife and I had been trying to have a child for 2 or 3 years, and finally, in 1986, we had a daughter, Emily, who 3 hours ago got home from Baylor, where she's a sophomore. So I got to give her a good hug and then get ready for tonight. When I had a new baby, it really made me look at my priorities, because I couldn't suddenly not work or not travel. And so those first few months, when Emily was a little child, I was missing a lot, and I really wasn't happy with how I was looking to be as a father in the years to come. And I didn't know what to do about it, but I felt trapped. And there's a term that some people use that are professionals, like accountants or lawyers, for what I was experiencing, and it's called golden handcuffs, which means, yeah, you're doing fine financially, but you're really handcuffed with the amount of freedom you have and any other priorities in your life. So it was Easter weekend of 1987, the Saturday night. This is the Saturday night, Sunday morning that Jesus rose from the dead. And out of the blue, I had a very unusual thing happen to me. And when I first tell it to you, a lot of you are going to think, oh no, he's one of those. You know, this is kind of creepy. But God, knowing that, you know, I'm a lawyer, so I'm a skeptic, knowing that I'd probably be a skeptic about it, gave me some confirmation that I'll share with you to give you some comfort as well. And then frankly, what's happened in my life since then almost proves the event. I went to bed that night, and like a lot of nights, I was really scared, laying there in bed about how am I ever going to get out of this trap I'm in. I mean, I've got another 30 or 40 years of this. I was in my mid-30s. And so I went to sleep, wife Debbie asleep next to me, and in the middle of the night, I woke up. And I'm one of these that I'm either awake or asleep. There's no sleepwalking, and I don't need coffee in the morning to wake up. I'm awake or asleep. And I was awakened because in our bedroom there in Houston, it was filled with a bluish light. And I could kind of hear there was kind of like the presence of a hum. It was like there was something in the room, but it was just the light. And I was hearing over and over as I was sitting up in bed, don't worry, Tom. Everything will be okay. Kind of like I talk. Don't worry, Tom. Everything will be okay. Now, I think I got a little taste of heaven because I felt, you know how you get those goosebumps or that heebie-jeebie feeling when something makes you happy? I was just having a rush of that, and your normal inclination would have been to wake Debbie up, you know, but I just sat there hearing over and over, don't worry, Tom, everything will be okay. And just seeing everything in the room just filled with this bluish light. And so I didn't know how long this lasted, but eventually it started fading away. I'm sitting there in total peace. The hum gets less and less, and finally it evaporates. And I had no doubt but that I didn't need to worry, everything would be okay. And so I lay back down, kind of like a little baby that doesn't have any worries, went back to sleep. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing I remembered was that event, and I knew it wasn't a dream. But I also knew if I told Debbie, she would say, "Been working too hard. You know, this isn't the kind of thing you really share." And I didn't have any basis for how to decide what this was. So I did what a lot of people do and what a lot of professionals do. I really felt like I needed to tell somebody. So I decided to tell my secretary. who was a devout Roman Catholic. So, Monday morning, Karen, I have the wildest thing happen to me Saturday night. And she immediately interrupts me and says, Tom, I know. I couldn't wait to talk to you. So this is setting me back a little, and I say, well, Karen, what do you mean? Remember, I'm a lawyer, so I ask the question. What do you mean? And Karen tells me that, Tom, I was asleep Saturday night, and I woke up wide awake, and all I could think about was something incredible was happening to you. So she tells me this. She says, what happened? And so I told her. Now, this is how God works, I think, to give you a little confidence when there are interventions in our lives. Because I know otherwise, I would have quickly rationalized that as a dream or a hallucination or something. But here was someone else, unprovoked, telling me that something really happened to me. So I didn't immediately try to figure this out or change my life. God works in His own time. I kept right on handling my lawsuits and traveling and doing everything else for about another 6 months. But I just had a new peace about everything, that everything was going to end up okay. So now we fast forward to Thanksgiving of 1987. My same secretary, Karen, my wife and I now call her my guardian angel. She's in New Orleans for Thanksgiving, and one of her relatives, one of her aunts, has a book about supposed apparitions of Mary, because you've all heard about Marian Apparitions, to some children in communist Yugoslavia at a place called Medjugorje, which Karen had never heard of. But she picked up this book and started reading it and couldn't put it down, which has happened to a lot of people who have learned of this place. So she read the book, and she had this instinct to bring it back. And so that following week after Thanksgiving, she walks into my office while I have a brief to write, and she says, I read this when I was in New Orleans over the holidays, and this has had a profound impact on me. If you have time, you ought to look at this, because it's changed my thinking about life and my faith. So I started sneaking some peeks as I was doing my other work and sitting on my sofa and the door closed. And as I was reading through the early days of these 6 children who were teenagers, describing how every day at 6 o'clock, Our Lady would appear to them, there was a description how about a week or two into these apparitions, there were a few thousand people who had come from the surrounding villages. They were starting to come every day for this event. And this one particular day, the communists had some social workers take these kids away from the village because they were going to try to stop these supposed fake apparitions. And so they told the kids, we're going to take you to the local big city and buy you clothes and all that. But the point was to have them not around at 6 o'clock in the evening when this event happened every day. And at 6 o'clock in the evening, the social workers had these kids out in some cars. The kids figured out that they are trying to keep us away from where we normally are in our village. One of them said, hey, can you stop? I have to go to the bathroom or something in the field. Remember this in Yugoslavia. They get out, they kneel. They're about 2 miles from the village. Thousands of villagers are out on this hillside where things have happened. And this book describes how this bluish cloud came down from heaven and floated out across these fields to where the children were. And thousands of people witnessed it. And as it described that bluish cloud and the adjectives it used and so forth, something hit me that this is how I described and thought about that experience that night, 6 months earlier this year.